Welcome to Spirits of Whiskey. We explore the wide world of whiskey through the many colorful personalities who make it, promote it, write about it, and more.
With each podcast, Carrie Moynihan, a certified bourbon steward and bartender, and yours truly, Philip Dobar, director of the Cocktail Collection, interview whiskey's most important names.
From high-profile makers, blenders, and ambassadors,
to out-of-the-way innovators and remote pioneers.
Join us as we discover the people and elements that give the water of life its spirit. Happy Inauguration Day, everybody! It is Whiskey Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. You are listening to episode 30. Today, we speak with Denny Potter, General Manager and Master Distiller at Maker's Mark.
But first, stay tuned for this week's Whiskey Chronicles. Hey, do you like whiskey, food, and adventure?
I do. Hi, I'm Carrie.
I'm Philip.
I'm Louise. I'm the chef.
Chef Louise Leonard, as in our World of Wheezy segment host here on the podcast. And Whiskey, a Chef's Journey. That chef.
That's right, the project that started this very podcast. The series stars our very own chef, Louise Leonard, winner of Emmy-winning The Taste on ABC.
And explores and connects the worlds of whiskey and food, city by city, country by country.
Would you like to see this spirited culinary adventure on a TV near you?
Well, you can by helping us finish the pilot episode through our crowdfunding campaign.
For more information, including behind-the-scenes photos, videos, and incentives,
and to make a pledge,
visit our website, whiskeyashefsjourney.com.
Or search for our campaign, Whiskey, a Chef's Journey, at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com now.
Well, I think it's a cheers to that.
Let's. Cheers.
Whiskey. It's an agricultural product. It's a spirit. And it's a tradition. And like any tradition, it enjoys wealth of history, some of it well known and often repeated, some of it hidden. And much of what is hidden in plain sight. Witness the whiskey label. Whiskey drinkers know the most common and their favorites at sight. But few know the stories behind the labels, some of which have quite a story to tell.
When 15-year-old John Walker opened a grocery store in 1820 in Kilmarnock, Scotland, little did he know that Johnny Walker, the whiskey that now bears his name, would become the world's best-selling blended Scotch. It's excellent, it's everywhere, and instantly recognizable. But the story behind its label is largely unknown. Its now iconic striding man was sketched on a dinner napkin by English cartoonist Tom Brown in 1908. According to brand historian Dr. Nick Morgan, it's the character's lack of clearly identifiable country of origin and station in life. Is he a gentleman? A rogue? A lion tamer? That distinguished Johnny Walker in a crowd of tartan and leather. The brand was available in 120 foreign markets before Coca-Cola made its way to Europe in 1919.
Just across the Irish Sea from Scotland sits Ireland, and its capital Belfast, home to Bushmills, the world's oldest distillery, founded in 1608 by Sir Thomas Phillips. If the Johnny Walker label represents commercial innovation and a global approach to marketing, the old Bushmills label bespeaks permanence, strength, and tradition. So much so that in 2008, the Bank of Ireland honored the brand by issuing notes bearing the image of the old Bushmills distillery. The current Bushmills label features a rendering of the original distillery license, along with the old Bushmills distillery signature pot still, an image that clearly identifies the brand as authentically Irish.
In 1953, T. William Samuels Sr., better known as Bill, purchased the Burke's Distillery in Loretto, Kentucky. 5 years later, the first run of Maker's Mark bourbon left the bottling line, and it looks today pretty much the way it looked then, with a striking seal of dripped red wax and oh-so-cryptic markings on its label. Bill's wife, Marjorie Samuels, better known as Marge, was responsible for the bottle's label and signature handcrafted appearance. And by successfully challenging Bill's desire to opt for a less expensive design, she both helped ensure the success of Maker's Mark and single-handedly changed whiskey packaging forever.
Up next, we speak with Denny Potter about that Maker's Mark label and its designer, now a Bourbon Hall of Fame inductee, and about maintaining the delicate balance between honoring tradition and driving the innovation at one of bourbon's most revered brands. Stay with us.
The Center for Culinary Culture, home to the Cocktail Collection and LA Food and Drink Museum, has a YouTube channel featuring a mix of how-to, lively talk, and culinary entertainment. Already streaming are Cocktails, The Grand Tour, Culinary Quickies, Music and Booze with Mo, and this podcast, Spirits of Whiskey. New shows coming soon include Complete Greek, telling the story of Greek food one dish at a time, and Spirits of Rum, a podcast featuring personalities from the wide world of cane spirits. Find us on YouTube, the Center for Culinary Culture, and subscribe now. The Center for Culinary Culture, telling the story of food and drink one taste at a time.
Today on Spirits of Whiskey, we welcome Mr. Denny Potter. Denny serves as General Manager and Master Distiller at Maker's Mark Distillery in Loretto, Kentucky. Welcome, Denny.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Nice pronunciation of Loretto. I like it.
You got it. Spelled Loretto, pronounced Loretto.
You got it.
Thanks to you, I know this.
He's a master of pronunciation. I get corrected often.
He is. He gets it right in.
Ever so gently and with
Gently, yes.
And with amicable humor.
Yes.
Of course.
Well, Denny, as we always start, we always ask about your whiskey journey. When you were a wee little lad, did you think whiskey is where I want to be? You know, since I'm here in Kentucky, that's obviously the choice that I want to make. Or were you even raised in Kentucky? Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I was born in Kentucky. My parents are from Louisville, so we can get into the pronunciation of Louisville as well if we'd like to.
Louisville.
Right.
Louisville.
Louisville, yeah. So my parents from Kentucky, I actually grew up in Indiana. But, you know, as far as the industry, if you're from the Commonwealth, you probably know somebody that's worked in the industry, does work in the industry. Mm-hmm. And even growing up, I did have some family that worked at Brown-Forman, which is, you know, obviously the big distiller and the big liquor company based out of Louisville. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, you know, for me personally, even though I was pouring drinks for my dad at probably 6 years old and they were always bourbon, it was never anything that I imagined that I would get into.
Tending bar for daddy.
Yeah. I mean, when dad said, "Hey, man, I need some 3 fingers on the rocks," I said, "All right, I got you. I can do that. That's easy."
Wow.
That is pretty easy.
That's kind of wonderful.
It was.
I mean, he told you how much to put in, so there you go.
Yeah, and it is interesting because it's not anything you ever really thought twice about. I mean, bourbon is a part of culture, right? I mean, and I think that's the great thing about bourbon is it's so experiential. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that truly is. You know, people always ask me, "Well, what's your favorite bourbon?" You know, this and that. I'm like, who am I with? Right? Yeah. Trust me, I have friends that I'm not getting the good stuff out for.
Sorry to interrupt. Quick question. 3 of your fingers or 3 of your father's fingers?
He would say 3. I knew for me that was pretty much a minimum of 4. And I might even have to throw 2 more on there.
Okay. So for you, it was a fist. Okay.
So a fist, yeah.
Yeah, right. You're exactly right.
So wait, a fist or a fist?
Well, and because he would drink out of the same glass, I knew where that minimum was. So it was pretty easy. It was just more of 3 fingers Potts because that was my nickname was Potts.
So cute.
Yeah, you know, it was something that, and I don't think that I was any different than most people that grow up here. Mm-hmm. That bourbon is just part of the culture. And once again, you know, never thought in a million years I would work in the industry. I was very passionate about the sciences, and I wanted to go into marine biology. That's really what I wanted to do. And and even when I went to college, I went to the state school, so I went to Indiana University because I grew up in Indiana. Mm-hmm. Definitely a big-time Hoosier, but little problem for a Hoosier interested in marine biology wanting to go to the state school is you're kind of landlocked.
Yeah. I don't think it's a Sea Grant institution.
Right. So the idea was get my BS in biology, graduate, and then go work on my master's in marine biology. And that's what I set out to do. And it was just one of those things that, you know, when I graduated from IU, my wife and I actually went to high school together, and she went to IU as well. And so she's a year older than me, and I love to point that out. But
Angie the elder.
Yeah. You know, so she was already out of school. So when I graduated, we knew we were going to get married. So I had some debt and some other things. So the idea was work for a little bit, pay some of that off, and then really, jump into the whole master's program. And it just one of those things, life kind of happens. And 2 years out of school, I was still working at Safety Clean as a lab tech, and Safety Clean recycles hazardous waste. So, that's really where I got to know a lot about wet chemistry and the things involved when it comes to manufacturing and what happens in manufacturing and how you can identify and process control through data in the lab. And so, I did that for 2 years and ended up getting a job in the lab at Jim Beam. And that was in January of 98. And of course, I knew about bourbon, had no idea really what it entailed in manufacturing. And what I was shocked with was just the allure of it, right? And the heritage and the legacy. Because, when I started working at Jim Beam that first week, one of the first people I met day one was Fred No.
Wow.
And Fred is a really, really good friend of mine. He lives a mile away from me. And then, Fred had basically taken over for his dad, Booker. Well, 2 days later, they're asking me to take distillate samples to Booker in Bardstown. Jim Beam Claremont's not that far away, maybe 15 miles. So here I am, green as hell in the industry, taking distillate samples down for Booker to taste. Because he was going to approve, what got barreled as Booker's. And also he liked to cook with it. I mean, Booker, he obviously, a lot of us operations guys, trust me, we love the finished product, but a lot of your quality control and what goes on in the distillery, you figure out on what you're tasting and smelling coming off the still, because you have to be able to make adjustments based on try to maintain that product quality on the distillate. And so that literally was my first week in the industry. And I quickly forgot about any idea of working in marine biology.
Or dolphins.
Well, you still work in liquid. It's just not water. It's the water of life.
Well, correct. And actually, in my career, I actually got to kind of dip my toe in the salt water when it comes to marine life and things like that, because I did have a 3-year stint running a rum distillery in the Caribbean. So,
how fun.
I saw that in your bio, but it says nothing about making rum. And that's on my list of questions. You actually did some rum making, some Cruzan rum, no less.
Yeah. Cruzan rum. Cruzan. Yeah, there's another pronunciation for you. You hear that Cruzan. No,
right.
It's Cruzan.
Right. Cruzan rum.
Yeah, I mean, the way that unfolded was I spent 5 years at Jim Beam, moved out of the lab after a year into operations. It's one of those things because you learn all the science about what's happening in the operation and you can suggest where they might go look for areas of tweaking this and that. Typically, if they had an opening in operations, they would look to the lab first. And if you had an interest in that, they would afford you the opportunity to move. And so I did. I moved into operations after a year. So did that for 5 years with Jim Beam and then went over to Maker's Mark. And so in 2003, came over to Maker's Mark. And, once again, you talk about, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the industry for who I've been able to work with and learn from. So,
yes.
I mean, I come into Maker's. And so obviously, Maker's was started by the Samuels family and Bill Samuels Jr. was running the show then. But little did we know at the time, when I came on board at Maker's in 2003, we had 4 master distillers, which would be master distillers, all here at the same time. And it was myself, Steve Nally, who Steve is with Bardstown Bourbon, but he was our longtime master distiller here, Kevin Smith, and Dave Pickerel.
Mm-hmm.
And so all 4 of us were here. In the way that I ended up taking over for the distillery at Maker's was Steve was retiring. Steve Nally. And so that's when Dave was kind of taking the role of master distiller here. And then, Steve was moving on. He was retiring. Then he didn't retire because he did the Wyoming Whiskey Project. And now he's with Bardstown Bourbon. And so I was running the distillery here for probably 6-7 years. And that's what led to, we're part of a group, obviously, of distillation companies or liquor companies. And we had acquired the Cruzan brand, but we also acquired the operation down in St. Croix in the USVI. So they came in 2010, they asked me to go down as general manager to kind of help onboard Cruzan, but also we had to spend like $70-80 million in capital over a 3-year period just to build the plant up, do some investment there. And so the idea was I was going to go there for 3 years and then come back to Maker's. Because one of the things that I realized pretty quickly, at Maker's Mark, I knew no matter what I did in my career that Maker's would be the best job I ever had, just because of the people, the environment, the brand. I mean, there's so many things that are incredible about this place. But so the comfort of knowing I was going to go down there, learn about rum, learn from the Nelthrops. So, Gary Nelthrop, his dad, Hardy, right? So Hardy and his uncle started Cruzan Rum, and Hardy at this point is in his 80s. And so I'm like, man, this is phenomenal. Plus I get to come back to Makers. And so, yeah, so myself and the family, we moved down to St. Croix for 3 years. You did what we needed to do there, came back. Unfortunately, wasn't able to come back to Makers. Went to another beam operation and did that for about 9 months, and was approached by Heaven Hill to go work for them. And so in 2013, I left to go to Heaven Hill, and it was the first time I'd left the group, right? The beam group. Mm-hmm. And so I go to Heaven Hill and eventually take over for Master Distiller for Parker Beam, and then became vice president of operations for Heaven Hill because they own a lot of other things besides just whiskey.
It's a huge portfolio.
Yeah, it is.
We interviewed Lynn House early in the run of the show.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not just, the figureheads either that I've been able to work with. It's people like Lynn and Bernie Lubbers. Mm-hmm. I mean, the list goes on and on for the people that are just so impactful and just so knowledgeable in all areas of our business that I feel like I've been able to work with, and just been super lucky because, when I go to Heaven Hill, you've got Parker and Craig Beam, you've got the Shapira family, you've got Lynn, you've got Bernie, you've got so many different people there. It had the best job in the world. I mean, it was a great job. But then in the summer of 2018, Rob Samuels, he had taken over for his dad. And I knew Rob before I left to go to St. Croix, just kind of called up and said, man, would you ever think about coming back? And, I really had to think about it. I'm like, Rob, I never really wanted to leave. The idea was that I was going to come back to Makers. And after we, talked about it for quite a while, and there's a long story behind it, but yeah, I mean, I left probably a dream job to come back to Makers as the general manager and master distiller. So I came back here in October of 18. So it's been a little over 2 years that I've been back. But all that time, the people that I've been able to work with, so I come back and, Rob's in charge here. And then you've got, Jane Bowie. I'd worked with Jane before, but Jane was now basically running all of our innovation. We weren't doing, we'll talk about Makers 46 because I know we're going to taste it. Mm-hmm. But, that was one of the big projects I worked on right before I left to go to Crucian. And then I come back and, we've got, we're doing cast strength. We've got this private select program, which was phenomenal. We got this wood finishing series. And these are all things that, Jane had worked on with Rob. And so, I mean, I've just been extremely lucky with who I've been able to work with.
That's one of my questions is Jane's role. Yeah. Got to meet Jane. She was here in LA, and Maker's Mark has a director of innovation. That's not something most brands carry. Talk to us about that. That fits, as it were. How does that work within the brand?
Well, and I think a lot of people where that title exists usually resides on the marketing side.
How are we going to repackage what we already do to expand the market rather than how do we innovate the product?
Right. And I think Jane kind of started on the commercial side, but she has just a genuine curiosity about all things operations, and she kind of self-taught. And we're a pretty flat operation here at Makers. Mm-hmm. We don't have a ton of people. We're not siloed. We all wear a bunch of different caps. And I think that's kind of what happened with Jane is, after she had an international stint for us, and then when she came back, she just was very curious about barrels and wood finishing and wood technology, and all these things. And I just think that, working with Rob, they were able to build upon some of the things that Kevin and I had worked on with the 46 project and really grew it out from there. But so when you hear about innovation for Makers, we're not a typical innovator. A lot of times innovation is about looking at what's going on in the market and then coming back and figuring out what we're going to do. For us, we're very inward focused in how we innovate because, we're a brand that's been around for a long time, and we get that people are super interested in new things, things that are different. But at the same time, we've been around for 66 years and we do the things that we've done the same way throughout that time. There is a lot to be said for that. But how we innovate, understanding that our core liquid that was first distilled in 1954 in the vision that Bill Sr. and Margie had back then, that hasn't changed. So how can we build upon that? Just like with Bill Jr., and Makers 46, he didn't want to bastardize what his parents did. He just wanted to build something of his that kind of amped up what his parents did. Just like what Jane has worked on the innovation side with wood finishing, all of that liquid is core Makers liquid. It is core classic, what we call classic Makers. So when you dump it out of that barrel, we can send it straight over to bottling, cut it to 90 proof, and you've got classic Makers. Or you can take that, utilize wood finishing techniques, which obviously she has really helped spearhead working with Independent Stave, and build all these different products with that core liquid. So we're not looking to go out and change what we've done for 66 years. How can we build it, enhance it, and can continue to give people what they're interested in without changing our story? And so it's just kind of evolved into a role that's really rooted in operations, but because of her background with commercial, I mean, it's a natural fit. There's probably not too many people that can do what she does with that role and bridge those two areas because she can handle both. So it's really, she's our director of innovation and for the most part, our master blender for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And she's also very much a firecracker.
Jane and I have a very interesting relationship. You know, obviously we're really good friends. We work well together, but man alive, can we get in some fights? Neither one of us take it personal, but I think sometimes people are put off about how we talk to each other. And
so you're like siblings.
If you want a really interesting podcast, ask us to do one together. And you really only have to ask one question and we'll talk for 55 minutes.
Hey, get her on the phone right now. We'll do it.
Yeah, it's a point counterpoint discussion. So, yeah.
Actually, she is on our get to list, so we hope to and look forward to having her on the program.
I mean, she'll tell you she's much better than me, and I will call bullshit on that every time. But that's all right. If she was sitting right here, we would have that argument as well.
That's wonderful.
That's funny.
So, about the brand, 1954.
Yeah.
What was the thrust in 1954? Did it grow out of passion? Was the Samuel Sr.? Did he come out of a whiskey tradition? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, I mean, you're basically setting the perfect base for this conversation. So you had Bill Sr. and Margie. Bill Sr. was a 6th-generation distiller within his own family. So that's what he did his whole life. That's what he grew up with. Well, back in the 40s, they were making their own family whiskey, right? They had their own recipe. They had their own family distillery in Deatsville, Kentucky, the T.W. Samuels Distillery. They were making a product called T.W. Samuels, which is his name. Mm-hmm. The issue that Bill Sr. had was the family whiskey didn't have a great reputation. And I would say that probably whiskey at the time back in the 40s may not have had, specifically American whiskey, a great reputation. Sure. The reputation was it's something you drank quick to get drunk quick. You did shots.
So T.W. Samuels, so a grand 6th-generation distiller.
6th generation. So you can imagine, it's not, you have to have a lot of patience to make whiskey, right? I mean, you spend all this money up front for grains, and barrels, and process, and labor. You distill it, then you throw it in this barrel, and you sit back for, hopefully 4 years, if not longer. And then all of a sudden, it gets dumped out. The only way people want to drink it is to drink it really fast by doing shots. So it can be a bit demoralizing. And so, he and Margie decided to sell the distillery and also everything that they were bottling at the time. So, they sold the distillery. And, as we've said, that Heaven Hill ended up with that label, but they didn't initially get it. It kind of changed hands a few times. So you fast forward, they've been out of the industry for a few years. And I think they just realized that whiskey making is their passion and they wanted to get back into it, but they didn't want to do what they did before. And so they started out with the idea of, we want to create a sipping whiskey, a sipping bourbon, something you want to enjoy with your friends. Mm-hmm. And Bill Sr. knew he couldn't do that with the old recipe. Mm-hmm. So that's when he reached out to his industry friends, the Van Winkles, the Beams, the others, and really experimented and came up with the mash bill that we use today, which is a wheated bourbon mash bill. So they moved away from the old recipe, which was rye-based, to a wheated bourbon mash bill. Mm-hmm. And so in 1954, they did the very first barrel with our new mash bill, which we run. That's what we run today, which is 70% corn, 16% wheat, and 14% malted barley.
Okay.
And I skipped something there. They bought the distillery here in 53.
Okay.
So, here in Loretto, this distilling site's been around since 1805.
Wow.
So they bought the distillery in 1953, did the new recipe in 1954, and then immediately they knew, they had a problem because typically distillers would name and package whiskeys after themselves because it would give it a good reputation in the market. Like, if he's distilling it and he puts his name on the bottle, it's got to be good, right? Or he's standing by that product. Well, the problem was they no longer owned the rights to the T.W. Samuels name. So that's where Margie was a genius. And she said, Bill, you focus on the liquid. I'll work on the package. So the first thing she got to work on was, how can we tie this back to our family, back to the Samuels family? And Margie collected fine English pewter, and she knew that on the back of fine English pewter would be a symbol, a mark. Made it without using a name. And so she's like, that's it. It's called a maker's mark. I need to create a maker's mark for this bottle. And that's how she designed that SIV with the star that's on every one of our bottles. And it stands for Samuel's fourth generation commercial distiller. And the star represents Star Hill Farm, which was the name of the distillery in our location. Now, the big issue with that was he was sixth generation, right? But when they submitted the paperwork and they got the license back, they flip-flopped the Roman numeral, and it was going to be $500 to reprocess. And they were like, forget it, we're good with 4. So
that's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, so that's how they ended up with the SIV instead of the SVI. And then, so, once they had that, then obviously Margie's like, well, we got to call it something. You can't just have a symbol on the bottle.
Right.
And the more they were working through names, she always talked about, well, whatever it is, it really has to highlight, reference, lift up our maker's mark. The maker's mark has to be what this is about. Well, then she was like, hey, well, why don't we just call it maker's mark? So, so they got that. She designed the shape of the bottle. She designed the font that's used on the bottle. And then the most important thing that she came up with was the wax.
The wax top. Yep. That's my favorite part.
Yeah. And the inspiration for that was, at the time, fine cognacs were dipped in wax, right? But they were mainly dipped in wax so that they could be shipped and you didn't have to worry about the bottles leaking. But Margie recognized that it had a very premium look to it. So she mocked up a package and showed it to Bill. And, Bill's looking at it and immediately he's like, all right, I'm good with most of this. But he goes, we can't do the wax.
No.
It's going to be labor intensive. It's going to be too expensive. We're not going to do it. And then Margie literally was like, Bill, the deal was your liquid on package, the wax is going to stay.
Good for her.
Go, Margie. Go, Margie.
Yeah,
go, Margie.
No, you're absolutely right. Thank God, because, literally in that very short time period, the two most important decisions ever made for us, and the reason why we all feel we're still around, was change the mash bill to go to sweet, smooth, a sipping whiskey. So the wheated bourbon mash bill, and the fact that the wax remained. Because the wax is so iconic. And those two things work extremely well together because people will see the wax, they gravitate to it, they will buy that bottle because of the wax, but if they don't like what's in the bottle, they'll be done. So you automatically create that draw of getting people to get that first bottle. Then when they like the liquid, it just works. And so, the wax is so iconic that we have billboards here in the state of Kentucky, right off the interstates, that'll just have 3 drips of wax on it. It will not say Maker's Mark anywhere.
Love it.
And everybody knows what it is.
Because it's iconic.
So it really is. Obviously they had no idea how iconic, but I think they thought that it was a great idea. I just don't think they had any idea how big it would become. And so literally that first bottle, and Bill just turned 80 this past summer. Bill still has the very first bottle that we ran on the bottling line in the 1950s.
Wow. And
it's signed by, I think, the 12, 13 people that worked here. Mm. And what's funny about that, there are signatures on that bottle that their family members, it's a multi-generational operation. Their family members work here still. So, but that bottle looks pretty much identical to any of the bottles we have running down the line today. Mm. And so it's really unique. So that's how we got started. And that's pretty much all we ever had until 2010. That's the only thing that we ever had.
Sometimes we wait till near the end to taste.
Yep.
Well, I think we need to do that now.
Yeah. Sometimes we taste as we go.
Yeah, we can roll with,
Given the evolution of the brand, Carrie, I think you agreed we should taste as we go through the brand's growth.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start.
So I'm guessing we'd start with the
Maker's
regular.
Yeah, it's what we call our Maker's Mark Classic, right? It legitimately is 95% of what we do because it's all we did for 55 years. And, what we love about this and what I'll say, and I know I'm biased when I talk about Maker's Mark, but one of the things that I will say, and it's hard to prove me wrong on this, is I think it's one of the best universal bourbons on the market. What I mean by that is you can grab a 750 ml of Maker's Mark and you can take it anywhere. If you're going to a holiday party, a house party, a football tailgate, and you've got a bottle of Maker's Mark, if people are inclined to drink whiskey, that Maker's is going to check the box. Mm-hmm. If you like it neat or on the rocks, if you like it in a classic cocktail, if you like it with ginger ale or ginger beer or Coke, it's going to do all of that for you. So it's just an easy thing to take.
I took a liter bottle to a Christmas party 3 years ago and it was gone within 1 hour.
Wow.
Right, because it is. I mean, because people will pour it multiple ways. And so what this product is, we age for 6 summers. So we're pretty much 6 years old. We say fully mature instead of putting an age statement on. But the idea behind it is very sweet, smooth, clean, crisp, no bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, indeed. Lots of spice, though.
Yeah, we want it to finish on the tip of the tongue. You're going to get those things. You're going to get the vanilla. You're going to get the caramel. But it's just a very smooth, no burn type of bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to interject here and let you know that this is actually my introductory whiskey. When I was in college, back then I was drinking wine coolers and mudslides and Midori and after I moved to Los Angeles, my best friend from college came down for a visit and we went to, what's the name of that place that was in Swingers? Come on, guys, Swingers.
God, I know the movie, I'm afraid to say.
Can't help you. I know the film, but can't help you.
No, the Dresden. So we went to the
Dresden room, yes, in Los Feliz.
Yes, and we went and we watched the piano player and everything that was on the movie. They were there. And then afterwards, we went down the street to this other bar. And my friend was like, Carrie, you got to get into whiskey. I'm like, I got to get into whiskey. I was like, why? And he's like, oh, that's great. First, you got to start out with your Maker's Mark. Then you go up to like the Booker's. And then you go up to the Knob Creek. And then if you start to really getting into these higher end things, then you get into Scotch. And I was like, dude, I don't know about this. But that's a Maker's Mark. And I was like, that's not bad. Okay. And then what I really liked about it was the next day, and I drank a fair amount of it. And the next day I felt fine. And I was like, oh, that's new. So whiskey became my drink.
Right. Carrie, if you were slamming mudslides, I get it. Yeah, you're probably not going to have the same hangover.
Yeah. And calories, those mudslides, but so good.
You hit upon something, and it's an extremely common theme. People that enjoy makers, have drank makers, are fans of makers, they always have a story about who introduced them to makers.
Really?
And I think that's why our brand has been so successful, is because it is experiential, and there is always a story, because, there is a natural progression, right? Of what you want to try, what you want to drink, what you want to like. And makers has always been a great thing to transition to as you become more professional and you're in that setting with, you're having dinner instead of doing shots, and you're sipping. And it really goes in line with how Bill Sr. and Margie looked at the brand back then when they really wanted to change the family recipe there is so many stories about people and how and who introduced them to it, whether it was a bartender, their dad, their mom, their best friend. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's funny because my friend Matt, who's the one who introduced me to it, he finally eventually did move back down to Los Angeles, and he's also in filmmaking. And he now says, the student far surpassed the master. Like, now he comes to me and asks me questions because he is so nowhere near my level.
My maker's origin story, as it were. I knew of makers. I had drunk makers, but it didn't really mean a lot to me until Dave Pickrell started working with what's now the Cocktail Collection. We became friends, and he is the one who really introduced me to makers.
I believe it.
And of course, and this is when he was running Whistlepig.
Yep.
And as you know, the man had fingers in many pies. Anyway, he introduced me to this in a deep way. So, today's special for any number of reasons, but it feels very family.
Yeah.
This experience talking to you today and sipping through.
Well, I couldn't put into words everything that Dave meant to me personally and professionally. Dave hired me. That's how I got into makers. And then
the first time or the second time? This
is the first time. So when I knew Steve was retiring, I went and talked to Dave because I was basically running our quality control lab. I was our quality manager and also our environmental manager. I knew Steve was retiring, and I went to Dave. I'm like, Dave, I said, I want to run a distillery. It's what I've always wanted. I have operational experience. I love working with and through other people in operations. Give me a shot. I'll continue all the quality stuff, all the environmental stuff. And it took maybe Dave about 5 seconds to say, all right, you got it.
Nice.
And then, we had so much fun. For the longest time, it was just me, Dave, and Kevin. We were our taste panel for the longest time. And
what a terrible job that must have been.
We didn't have that many people. And so
every day ended with a happy hour.
We were pretty happy. And so, even when Dave moved on, and like you said, Dave ended up doing everything that he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was honestly, as far as somebody that loved the industry and wanted to be in it and be immersed in it and meet everybody he could, that is Dave. Like, there is nobody that loved this industry more than Dave.
People will never know how many brands he was responsible for developing and advancing.
And I feel like his last 5 to 8 years, he did exactly what he wanted to do. And I don't know that too many of us could say that. And obviously, he passed away too young. But had Dave known, like, I mean, he would have said, yeah, I'll take that script. So, yeah, no, I get it. I mean, and Dave was just an incredible storyteller and just an ambassador, not just for Makers, but all the other distilleries that he had a hand in after he left here.
Right. So, 2010.
Yeah, all right. So, let's fast forward a little bit.
Which is the next one I should be opening?
We're going to do 46 next.
46, okay.
So fast forward, I come on board in 2003, right? So basically, Bill is running everything. Then you have Dave. I'm reporting into Dave. And then, I'm taking over the distillery. And all Bill ever said to me, he said a lot of things, but the thing that really stuck with me the most was, he's like, don't F it up. He's like, don't F it up. He's like, my parents started this. We do this mash bill. This is how we do things. And operationally, there are a lot of things, people will claim to be handcraft. I don't know that people can claim to be handcrafted like we are. Mm-hmm. And he's like, just do not bastardize what we've always done. Don't come to me. He's like, if you're one of these distillers that wants to do 20 different things, he goes, you better not come to me because I'll fire you. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm good. Yeah, I just want to learn. I just want to learn. That's all I'm here for. So you can imagine in 2008, David already moved on. And Kevin was our plant manager, and I reported into Kevin. So Kevin was our master distiller. I was our assistant master distiller. And Bill walks into Kevin and I, and he's like, I think I want to do something different.
What?
And so we're both looking at Bill. I'm like, under my breath, I'm like, I think he's drunk. But after we kind of figured out, all right, he's kind of serious. He's like, let me explain myself. He's like, at this point, Bill knew he was going to be handing things over to Rob within the next few years. And Bill was really thinking about his legacy. And he's like, you know what? My parents' legacy is born in the liquid, right? Born in the liquid, born in the package. I get, Bill Jr. is the reason why we are who we are today, because of his genius and how he speaks to the brand, how he's advertised, the relationships he built. I mean, he really was the person that put us on the map. But Bill Jr. didn't want his legacy to be just rooted in that, right? The ad guy, the funny guy. He wanted to have more of a legacy. And he said, I want to have my own taste vision, just like my parents. And he's like, I don't want to do a new mash bill. So all of a sudden he's like, you guys need to help me, but I don't want a new mash bill. I don't want to age it longer. I don't want to change. I don't want to cast strength. He's throwing up all these guardrails. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell?
How are you supposed to change it?
Yeah. So he takes off. And oh, by the way, he said, and if you come to me with any of those things, I'm going to fire you. So Kevin and I are like, oh my goodness. Well, it just so happened the next week we were meeting with Independence Dave, which is our cooper, our barrel manufacturer, and they're a multi-generational family operation. So Brad Boswell was coming in of the Boswell family. And we were just talking about the next year's supply of barrels, because you have to be 1 to 2 years ahead of like your barrel needs, because, we air dry all of our wood for a minimum of 9 to 12 months before you can even use it to build a barrel. So anyway, we're talking about all that. We're like, Brad, man, listen to what Bill has tasked us with. And after he stopped laughing and he asked, he's like, was he drinking? We're like, no. And he's like, I have some ideas. He's like, do you guys pay any attention to what we do on the wine side? And of course, Kevin and I were like, wine side. Yeah, right. And he's like, no, I'm serious. He goes, you guys, you really need to pay attention. He's like, I tell you what, he goes, I have a wood chemist. And I mean, of course, Kevin and I were really chuckling then. You have a wood chemist. He's like, I have a wood chemist. He's like, I'm going to send him over and he's going to explain to you what we're doing on the wine side. So guy comes in, and that's when he started talking to us about all these finishing techniques that they were doing on the wine side, whether it was, cubes or staves or you name it. There were small barrels, all these things were like, oh, wow. Because Bill's thing was he just wanted to create his version of Makers on steroids. He wanted it amped up, right? So we start looking at all these wood finishing techniques. And so in 2008, we started kicking off these series of projects to try to get to where Bill wanted, just based on wood finishing, using core Makers at that 6 years, and then, getting to that Makers on steroids. So long story short, we ended up stumbling upon a process where you take a barrel of Makers, you dump it out, so it could go to bottling for classic Makers. But what we do is we pop the head off, and then we have these French oak staves that these seared French oak staves that we'll take 10 of them and we'll attach them to the head of the barrel. We put the head of the barrel back on, and then we put that classic makers back into the barrel.
So they're suspended in the juice.
Yeah, they're suspended in the juice. And then we roll that. We need to cold age it. So we actually roll it into our cellar to age it at about 40 degrees for 9 additional weeks.
Wow.
And so, of course, back then we didn't have a cellar. We knew we wanted to use French oak. We also knew that French oak has 8-9 times the tannins in it. Mm-hmm. And the one thing we couldn't do is create something that had bitterness, and you'll get bitterness from tannins. So we immediately were doing these projects during the winter time and aging them cold because we wanted the flavor from the French oak. We just didn't want the bitterness. And so through all of that, tons of different projects, we came up with this one version that was makers on steroids. So the amped up vanilla, the amped up caramel. And we let Bill taste it. And he had been tasting all along. We're like, Bill, we really think we've got it. And so Bill tasted it and he's like, by God, you're there. He's like, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. And so we're all high-fiving and everything else. And then Bill's like, well, I guess we got to think about what we're going to call it now. Because, we're just operations people. We don't name anything. And Bill's looking at the sample bottle, and all it said on the sample bottle was Maker's Mark Profile 46. Because it was literally just one of the barrel profiles, one of the project profiles that we were working on. Mm-hmm. And Bill's like, there we go. We'll call it Maker's Mark 46. And probably one of the worst ideas we've ever had, because this product's been around for 10 years and nobody understands what that 46 represents. They think it's 46 proof, 46 months, but it was literally Profile 46. So
maybe you should have called it Profile 46, instead of Maker's.
But it provokes the question. And you have 30 seconds of their time to tell them the origin story.
True.
It's the same deal with you're familiar with Tequila Ocho.
Yeah.
Nicolas Camarena and Thomas Estes. Everyone asks, Tequila Ocho. It was batch number 8. That's the one that worked for them. And so, hence the name. But it gives them 30 seconds of a consumer's time.
Right.
It does. And so we're super proud of it. So, the notes on this, I've kind of said it, amped up vanilla and caramel. I get a lot of cherry notes, especially on the nose. It's bottled at 90. Yeah. Where, Classic Makers is bottled at 90. So, where 46 plays, it's, there again, it's any way you like it, but we see 46 a lot neat on the rocks in classic cocktails.
Yeah.
It just kind of plays. But what that did, we had no idea, but we were the first ones to really go after wood finishing like this. Nobody on the whiskey side was doing anything like it. And most people aren't doing it like us anyway. But because we had these guardrails of not bastardizing where we started in 1954, it led us to this wood finishing technique, which then eventually led us to the wood finishing series, our private select program, all these things that we can do from the wood finishing side that was born out of, we just didn't want to bastardize where we started.
Yeah.
Right.
So when we talk about innovating and looking inward, that's what that means. It's like, we're looking inward. How can we do things that still tie back to who we are and how we started? So
now, how did you decide on 94 proof? As you say, 4 points higher than standard makers.
Yeah, that was literally just through tasting. We knew we didn't want to be 90. We knew we wanted to be a little bit higher than 90. Mm-hmm. We just wanted it to come through a little bit. And honestly, for everybody that worked on that project, we would do those samples blind from a proof standpoint. And 94 proof was just where we ended up.
Okay.
It's literally where everybody felt like what Bill was looking for and what we were working towards was expressed the best, was at 94 proof.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot, as it were.
Yeah.
A little side note, the Maker's Mark also was part of the original sizzle reel for Whiskey Chef's Journey. We had Samara Rivers. Oh, wait, now it's, what is
Davis.
it? Now Davis. Samara Davis as our whiskey expert teaching Louise about Maker's Mark. And we used the regular, we used the 46, and then we used the Black Bourbon Society's barrel pick. Yeah. So it was really good tasting.
They did a private select barrel.
Yeah, it was really good too.
So this led into, our barrel program is different from everybody else's. Literally, our barrel program is allowing people to do what we did with Bill to create 46, except we use different staves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We don't just use the same 10 staves. They're able to come in and pick the staves that they want to use. And so the combination that Samara and Armand came up with ended up winning double gold at San Francisco.
Right.
Is really, really.
It was really good.
And they've done that barrel multiple times. They don't even, they don't even have to show up anymore. There's like, hey, we need another one of those,
Is anyone else allowed to use those same staves, or is it now like a proprietary?
I don't know that they have, if it's proprietary or not, to be honest. Nobody else is, I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody.
Well, they'd have to first of all know which ones they picked, I guess, and how many of each.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, most people, if they're going to go through the process, they want their own.
Yeah.
They want to be able to tell their own story because
I don't know. If they've tasted it, they may want to do it.
Well,
it's really good.
True. But it's also what you're looking for when you come in to create that barrel. The accounts are, how are you going to use the juice? And especially if you're a bar or restaurant, is it, are you going to serve this in an old fashioned? Is this going to be spring, fall, summer, winter? So there's a lot of different variations.
Right. Is it a craft cocktail bar? Is it a whiskey bar?
Yeah.
Because some things don't play well with others and some do.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed my liquor store, local bar. Well, that's a local bar right now. They're all closed. But the local liquor store has their own barrel selected Circus liquor. And I love walking in there going and seeing the Circus liquor on their labels. I think it's so cute.
Yeah, I mean, it's very experiential. And the whole private select program is just, it's really what started probably 10 years ago where people were wanting to come in and pick their own barrels of established brands, whether it's Knob Creek, Elijah Craig. But because of how we do things operationally, I could roll out 5 barrels of Maker's Mark that are all 6 years old. And because we do barrel rotations, they all taste the same. Right. Whereas, if you have other products that are all, let's say, 6 years old, but they've aged at different floors of the warehouse, they're all going to taste different, even though they're all the same age. Mm-hmm. We wanted to have the same relationship and allow consumers to do that. We just couldn't do it in the traditional way. So that's where Jane specifically created that program working with Rob of how people could have their own barrel, but yet do it in the fashion of 46 in what we did and what Bill did in creating that product.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have 2 more expressions to taste.
Yes.
One is the Maker's Cask Strength, and the other is the 2020 wood finishing release.
Yeah, let's do. So one of my favorite stories about when I came back to Maker's, you got to remember. So in 2008, when Bill approached us about doing something different, he specifically said to me, if you come back and tell me you want to release a cask strength Maker's Mark, I'm going to fire you. So,
So you came back and said, we want to do a cask strength.
It was already out. And so the funny thing about it was, Bill handed the reins over to Rob, and Rob loves cask strength. He's a lot like me with his palate. He likes higher proof. And so Rob basically, obviously, is going to trump his dad at that point. And he's like, we need to release a cask strength. And of course, Jane's there working with them. They're high-fiving each other. Here I am working at Heaven Hill going, I wonder who got fired over that decision. And then so when I came back, this is one of the first questions I asked. I'm like, all right, how did you get the cask strength? And then, they explained, well, when Rob kind of took the reins, this was a real passion project of his. And so that's what we ended up with. We've seen this evolve as well, right? Like people have they love really more of the natural barrel. And, there's nothing more impactful than a cask strength right out of the barrel. As distillers, it's our favorite because it's the true expression of the whiskey. And so what's different about our cask strength isn't in the process or anything else. It's just the fact of the proof. Mm-hmm. So, there are things that we do that nobody else would do, either because it's too labor intensive or it's too damn expensive. And one of the things that we do is we go in the barrel, when we go to age, we go in at 110 proof, right? To be a bourbon, you just have to be 125 or less. You just can't be over 125.
Right.
We could go in at 125. And this is no joke. If we decided to go in at 125 rather than 110, this last year, we would have saved $10 million.
Wow.
Okay.
Because you buy less barrels and you need less warehouse space. So it's a very expensive decision to go in at 110. That being said, we know that that's who we are. That's how we started. It's the best way to express our taste vision. We're not going to change it, right? Then you throw in the fact that we rotate barrels, which means all of our new barrels, when they get filled at 110, a typical bourbon warehouse is 6 floors tall. So all of our new barrels going in, we'll spend the first 3 summers in the top 3 floors. So floors 4, 5, and 6. When I talk about barrel rotation, what that means is after 3 summers, we will rotate those barrels down to the lower 3 floors. So floor 6 will go to 1, 5 will go to 2, and 4 and 3, depending on the warehouse, sometimes we flop those, sometimes we can leave them because the microclimate doesn't vary that much. But because of that, we can kind of really equalize what you lose to angel share over the 6 years. So we're still going to lose, roughly 25% to evaporation. It's just we'll lose equal shares of water and alcohol. So when that barrel gets dumped, we're going to be pretty damn close to 110, right? So a lot of other bourbons will go in at 125, but then their barrel strength might be 140 or above. And typically it's because they've spent most of their time at the top of a warehouse where you're going to lose a lot to evaporation, but you lose a lot more water than alcohol. So that proof shoots up. For us, it's very balanced. And so it's going to we're usually around 108 to 112. And so that cask strength, that's what you're getting. You're getting really the most natural state of our whiskey that you could get because we don't do anything and we don't.
I think I poured too much for this time of day.
That's on you, Carrie.
I'm feeling
That's on you.
And I'm using the wee ones, the wee glasses, the wee Glencairns.
You're not supposed to fill them to the top.
I did it.
No matter how small they are. What year was this introduced?
I want to say, Philip, I think it was 15.
Okay. All right.
Or 15, I think, roughly.
Okay.
Out of these four, I know we haven't had the fourth one yet, but out of these four, which is your favorite?
Well, we haven't had the fourth one yet. Now, have we?
Okay, well, we can go and have the
as a segue, as a bit of segue to the fourth, the Cocktail Collection and the Center for Culinary Culture have done a couple of programs with makers over the last 2 or 3 years. I know that there is a cask strength Makers 46.
Yes.
I know because the Cocktail Collection owns a bottle.
Yep.
That remains sealed. Can you talk to us about that and the role it plays in the recent evolution?
Yeah. So, we did not a huge release of the 46 cask this year. The main thing about that was a celebration of the 10-year anniversary of Makers 46. So that's really what that was about. It allows us, anytime you release a new product like that, it gives you the opportunity to talk about your core products. That 46 cask, people see that, and then people ask questions about it. And you're like, well, let me tell you, that's about the 10-year anniversary of Makers 46, and let me tell you about Makers 46. So the cask is really a celebration of the 10-year. That being said, we are looking to that to be a normal release, not anything large scale, but continue to be nationally distributed. Don't look at it as being an Easter egg or anything like that, but something that could be something that be available.
Yeah. Now, it is an homage to Bill Samuels Jr., correct? In fact, it carries his name.
It's a celebration to Bill and the 10-year anniversary of when we released Makers 46 back in 2010. So, yeah, and it's good. It's good juice. And what's funny is if you come to our distillery, we sell bottles of Private Select that we just kind of do in-house, just for people that are, because, one, they're not going to buy their own barrel or do anything like that or spend the time. So we will actually create some and then sell those expressions in the gift shop. We sell one that's called the Bill Samuels Jr. Private Select. It's Maker's Mark cask strength.
Yeah. The 46 cask strength, correct?
Yeah, 46 cask. We have sold that in the gift shop for a few years. We just never said that it was 46 cask. It was just Bill Samuels Jr.'s Private Select.
So here's a question, minus all of the Private Select people, because that's a lot of different versions, but how many expressions do you guys have altogether besides the individuals? Well,
let's see. So we've got Maker's Classic, we've got Maker's Cask, we've got Maker's 46, we've got 46 Cask, we've got Maker's Mark 101, which is a new release, and you'll see more of that. It was mainly global travel retail. So that's Maker's Mark at 101 proof.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful box. You guys
Isn't it great?
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, no, really proud of that package. And then, we're doing, and we'll taste it, we're doing this annual wood finishing series release, which last year we did RC6. This year we've got, what we're going to taste, which is the SC4 PR5. So, even though that liquid's different, that wood finishing series is something established now.
Nice.
And I think that's outside of, locally around Derby time, we'll do a mint julep release, a premix just here in the state of Kentucky.
Okay. A bottled cocktail or just modifying agents?
It's one we've done. We've done it for years, mainly just for the state. And I'm talking maybe 1,000 cases.
Wow. Okay.
So we typically will do that annually as well. Shit, I think that covers it.
Okay.
It's not a lot. And all of those are born out of, that.
The Maker's Classic.
Yeah, the Maker's Classic. You got it. You got it.
All right. Then I think we should taste the 2020 limited release wood finishing series.
Yeah.
Yes, let's talk about that one.
Yeah. So what this is the the second release in our wood finishing series. So the first one was 2019, and people that have followed it would know it as the RC6. So what the wood finishing series is, and this is definitely the brainchild of Jane and what she's learned in wood finishing, plus working with independent stave, is she wanted to create a program where we could tell the story of production through wood finishing. So, and what that means is, last year with RC6, the focus was yeast and the yeasting process. Mm-hmm. And if you're ever at a distillery and you have an opportunity to taste the jug yeast, it's very flavorful, right? It's very hoppy. It's very fruity. There's all these things. So, how could we create a product that would tell the story of yeast? So they set out to create something that was very fruity, bright, spicy, just something that kind of told that story. And so it took 2 years to create the product, but in 2019, we released RC6. And what that stood for, once again, because we're horrible at naming things, because we have this relationship with Independent Stave, they actually opened up a research center about 9 miles away from us, mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Where we can work directly with them on stave development and everything else. So this stave that they developed, utilizing our wood finishing practices, was Research Center Stave Profile number 6, RC6. Mm-hmm. So that's what was released. And like I said, it just kind of tells the story of yeast. So this year, we wanted to tell the story of seasoning from the barrel side. So when we talk about seasoning, it means we take that white oak and we sit it outside to let it season and oxidize and break those tannins down and break other things down inside the oak before we use it to build a barrel. And so because we wanted to tell the story of seasoning, we know that as you break down lignans into vanillin, you get vanilla. As you break down the hemicellulose, you get caramel, right? And then the one thing we knew we wanted to be, we had to be tannin free, because we did not, that's a big thing for us, is no bitterness, so tannin free. So what we found out was we couldn't do it with just one stave. And what Jane and Andrew with Independent Stave and Beth, who works for Jane, what they figured out was, okay, we really need to create something that's heavy vanilla and then create something that's heavy caramel and then blend those barrels together. So it was really our first ever blended release. Okay. So we have some barrels that were created with a PR5 stave, which is American oak. And then we had other barrels that are created with the SE4 stave, which is French oak. Mm-hmm. And then you can blend those together to get this product. So on this is our second wood finishing series, telling seasoning, heavy vanilla, heavy caramel, tannin free. And what I'll say about this is my favorite release that we've ever done, because it is, you put your nose in it, there's so much vanilla in that, it's ridiculous. And then when you taste it, it's got an extremely creamy finish. Mm-hmm. It's got a velvety mouthfeel to it that I love. I'm big about mouth finish, and this has one of the best mouth finishes of any product I've ever been associated with. And I just love it. It's all those things that I love. I love heavy vanilla. And this is on the nose, is such an intense vanilla. And then it really comes through on the flavor.
It is.
Well, it does kind of remind me of the holidays with all the baking spices.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely get some baking spices in there as well. Yeah. A bit of burnt caramel.
Mm-hmm. The mouthfeel is extraordinary.
And if you just add a little bit of ice.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I think I might put one of those giant slow melting.
Yeah. As the ice melts, the creaminess just gets enhanced. Like every time, I am obsessed with drinking this right now. So
how many bottles are you going to keep before it's gone?
But in reality, I just love to drink this every single night.
Wow.
I'm worried because we don't have, obviously we released this. Mm-hmm. We don't hold any back. I do have 4 bottles. And
that's it?
Yeah, I don't know what to do. I am trying to ration, but it's tough.
So the 2019 is gone.
Yeah, the 2019 is gone. We do have some bottles of that around. I say that. We do keep a little bit around, but I'm talking maybe a couple cases.
Sure, archival.
Exactly.
Now this sits at 110.8 proof.
Yeah.
Is that cask strength?
Yep, these are all cask strength.
Okay.
Nice. All right. Now, would you cocktail with this?
I would. Here's my thing. And I'm the world's worst bartender, mixologist, whatever you want to say, right? So I will always drink this neat or on the rocks. It's just, I'm lazy. I'm bad at mixing drinks. You name it. It's how I prefer it. The toughest thing about this pandemic for me professionally is I would love to go out and taste what these, professional people are doing with this wood finishing series in cocktails.
Yeah. And under normal circumstances, you spend a fair bit of time on the road.
Yeah.
So you get to experience the best in cocktail making around the country.
So I'm typically on the road once a week, and people will always ask, what's your favorite cocktail? And I always say, and it's the God's honest truth, there's nothing I love more than when I'm traveling and you walk into an account. They're just excited, right? They have, somebody from the distillery that's there, and I'm like, give me what you got. What's your favorite maker's cocktail?
Mm-hmm.
And literally sitting there, like I said, it is experiential.
Mm-hmm.
And having them talk you through how they created this cocktail with makers in mind. And that's my favorite cocktail.
No matter what it is.
Understood. What's in front of you?
Whatever's in front of me, whatever they created. And then the story they're telling me as we're having it. I mean, it's my favorite. It's the one thing that I miss more than anything about traveling is really getting to connect with people that are phenomenal about this. Let's face it, if it wasn't for the cocktail side of this business, we sure in the hell wouldn't be sitting where we are right now.
Right.
Oh, cocktails move product.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so people that are still stuck on this, you got to drink it neat or on the rocks. Bullshit. I get it, whatever, that's you. But I'm telling you, you got to try what people, because there is a bit of artistry to this.
Oh, yeah.
So to be able to, and these are careers now, right? People are with these accounts and, just the money, the revenue you can make, it's phenomenal. So why not sit back and let them show you what they're really good at?
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. Listen, anytime I don't have to talk and they can talk to me about makers and what they're doing, I freaking love it. That's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I love to hear what people want to do with your stuff.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Me too. Yeah.
You compose the work, they perform it.
Right.
Absolutely.
My job's easy. It really is. The way that people, and Jane's like this too. She's just, very creative in how they utilize, the liquid. And it's phenomenal. It amazes me.
It's funny.
At the end of the day, I'm an operations guy. So
of all the makers and blenders we've interviewed on Spirits of Whiskey, you are the first to give that as an answer.
Yeah.
Favorite cocktails or
that's
favorite category. It's whatever's in front of me.
Yeah.
Because you're getting a human expression.
Yeah.
You're getting an artifact from the heart, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all legitimately good. I'm not saying that. Honestly, it might be the worst tasting cocktail in the world. I'm not tasting that because I'm listening to what they're telling me and how they created it. I'm like, man, it's just, I don't know.
Right. But if you put good product in, you'll get a good product out too. So.
That's the beauty of our industry is how social it is. And, just the connections you can make with people doing various different things within the industry all over the world. I don't know of any other industry like it. And I thank God every day that I get to work in it. it's phenomenal.
Well, I'm going to say after tasting all four of these, I can definitely taste the classic throughout.
Mm-hmm.
After I looked for it, I was like, oh yeah, no, there it is. I also like to pour them and then go back and forth between. And ironically, my favorite two are the 46 and the 2020, and they have the same bottle shape. So I don't know what that means. You're putting everything that I like the best in the same bottle shape.
I can't sit here and tell you that it had an impact on the liquid, but we can roll with that.
Talk to us about bottle shape.
It's a good looking bottle.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look for everything that comes in this bottle shape now and try that first, because apparently everything that you put in that bottle shape is going to be for me.
Talk to us about bottle shape, because you have the standard bottle shape that you use for some of the line, and you have this more than the squared, and you have this more rounded that you use for certain other expressions. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's taller, a little flatter.
It's great packaging, and packaging is fascinating in and of itself, and the decisions that lead to it.
Literally, I think when you see the more rounded bottle, like the 46 bottle, pretty much anything that we're going to release that involves wood finishing, for the most part, is going to be in that style package.
Oh, okay.
Right? All right. And that's why, and I don't know if you've noticed, but like with the classic makers, we just changed our package on the cask strength back to the classic makers bottle.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it wasn't in this bottle before?
I don't know which bottle you have because we just...
Well, it's in the same shape as the classic, but the label is small.
Okay, yeah. Before it was in more of an ornamental type bottle.
Okay.
You can obviously look it up. You can see the difference. It's not a huge difference, but it's different. So we just moved that cask back into the classic for a lot of why you guys are asking it, because that is, it's an expression of makers classic that did not involve wood finishing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. That makes sense.
So all of the wood finished expressions are in the more rounded,
or
dare I say, French
Yeah, I mean,
There's a continental look about these.
Yeah, the 46 bottle is a beautiful bottle.
Mhm.
It's not as operationally friendly as we'd like it to be, but just because the way that it's built, you get a lot of tipping that occurs on the bottling line.
Yeah. It's not very well friendly.
Yeah, it's heavy in the shoulder, so you typically have to slow your lines down so you don't get any tipping on the line.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a beautiful package for sure.
Yeah.
So last question about the wax. I know that like 4th of July, I've seen the red, white, and blue. Various different colors do you guys use throughout the year for special?
Well, there was a time where we did a lot of different, typically they're double dips. On occasion, we would do the triple dip, which is the red, white, and blue.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We don't do as much anymore. So here's the problem with multiple dipped bottles. One is people won't drink them.
What?
Commemorative.
They want to have them, pretty insane.
There are a lot of times where we have to go on allocation because we just don't have enough juice to put out to the market. So anytime you're putting something out, you want to make sure that people are drinking it. The other problem you have with those is by nature, opening a bottle with wax on it, if it's not done right, can be a difficult thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It can be somewhat labor intensive to get it open. So, but what we do is we typically will do double dips, and they're usually related to somebody winning a professional sports championship.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So that's really what we've relegated it to. So just like when the Lakers won the NBA title, we will do purple and gold double dips.
I did see that one.
So you guys should have seen it out there. Same thing with Major League Baseball, the NFL. So we don't do a lot of it. I mean, we might do total double dips, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 cases on an entire year.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just go out. It's a targeted market, but they'll go out. We don't do near what we used to. When I was here the first time, we actually did double dip bottles for every NFL team, and we sent them every NFL market.
Wow.
And the problem was when they would get to the liquor stores, down in Miami, they'd be like, hey, come get your Miami Dolphins Maker's Mark bottle. Well, we ended up getting a letter from Paul Tagliabue, a cease and desist that said, you guys can't do that. You're marketing these as NFL bottles and we're not seeing a dime from you. So, but that's not, that wasn't that big of a deal, but,
oh, Lord.
But they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
So he waxed financial.
He did. Yeah.
This has been, I don't think glorious is too strong a word. This has been glorious.
No, I don't. It's been fantastic.
Well, I appreciate that. You guys have been awesome.
Good
This has
time.
been fun.
Thank you, Potts.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Potts Potter.
Hopefully when the pandemic is over, we can start making rounds to everyone's places of work where we've hosted on the show, because we would love to do follow-up.
We'd love it. I mean, I know you're talking about getting Jane on. It'd be awesome. You guys could do it here on site. That would be a lot of fun.
That would be wonderful.
We'll have the car pull around,
Yeah.
and then we'll hop in.
Oh, Denny, a pleasure. A pleasure. Thank you so very much.
Thank you guys. Truly enjoyed it.
Hey, Louise, how are you this week?
I'm doing well. How you been, Carrie?
I'm good. We just talked to the wonderful folks over at Maker's Mark, and we had 4 different drams that we tasted. So we sent those over to you and wanted to know which one of those fabulous beauties was your choice for this week, and what did you make with it?
Well, this week I chose the Maker's Mark Wood Finishing Series 2020 limited release.
Ah, that was a good one. It's hot. It's 110 proof, 110.8.
Yes, it was hot. It was hot to try.
Ah.
It was hot to try, but with some little bit of sweetness going on, as always with the Makers, right?
Right.
So I found the vanilla and caramel was super pronounced on this one for me, like even more so than normal with their whiskeys, which I was fine with because it was so hot. And then, I was kind of racking my brain like, I guess I could use this in a cocktail, but then I didn't know if I should kind of mix something that's got all, that's exceptional like this with other stuff. So I felt like, oh no, I should probably just have a dram of this and call it a day, in which case I was thinking about a simple dessert of cheeses. I mean, this is not really as much as what I'm going to make as what I would probably, while drinking this, be a little too drunk to make anything anyway.
Yeah, that proof. I mean, have a couple sips, you're on the floor.
I figured if you had yourself a nice dinner party of whoever's in your pod these days, right? And prior to your dinner, if you put together a nice cheese board, you could put some nutty Gruyère. That'd be really good with the caramel notes. something like soft and creamy, a little bit mild, like a Camembert. You could put a slight amount of funk with a Roquefort, but I wouldn't go too crazy on anything too like funky, chunky with this. But if you made a cheese board and then got yourself some really, I just had a batch of perfectly ripe pears recently, and they were so juicy and delicious. And I was thinking some really great ripe fruit. And then if you wanted to get frisky, maybe the day before doing this, you make yourself a homemade brittle of sorts. I would use pecans. I would probably put some sage in there. I tend to like an herb in my brittle. And if you put this all out, and everybody sat around with a little dram and munched on some cheese, I think that'd be a nice way to finish a really pleasant meal.
That sounds fantastic. And of course, I don't know anything about any of those cheeses, so I would be excited to go try them with a dram.
You've never heard of any of those cheeses?
I've heard of the first one. I don't think I heard of the other two. No, I like my cheddar and my Colby Jack and my pepper jack. That's my cheeses.
I know, but I have to make fun of you. You need to get out more, and you need to eat more cheese.
I do need to get out more, but so does the rest of the world. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful education on cheese that I obviously need. And I can't wait to try it with the whiskey because I still have plenty left. They were generous and sent an entire bottle of all 4 of them, which was fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll catch you up next week when we talk about the next dram.
Till the next time. Cheers.
For show notes on today's podcast, please visit our website at spiritsofwhiskey.com. That's whiskey with an E.
We'll include links and supporting documents from today's Whiskey Chronicles, as well as tasting notes and recommendations from today's World of Wheezy.
As always, you'll see upcoming topics, a guest roster, and links to past shows. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, Salam.
Slanchava.
You can become a sustaining supporter of Spirits of Whiskey by making a monthly donation. Just visit the Spirits of Whiskey page at anchor.fm. That's anchor.fm/spirits-of-whiskey and click on the support button.
And if you really like us, give us a 5-star rating and a review.
Thank you. Spirits of Whiskey is produced by First Reel Entertainment and the Center for Culinary Culture, home of the Cocktail Collection, and is available via Anchor, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are heard.